belt to the face!
Hello and welcome. This is ICDC, the Infinite Crisis and DC Comics crossover show. I'm Kyle Horner, and today I'm joined by Brent Schmidt, lead content designer on Infinite Crisis Game, Cardell Kerr, creative director on Infinite Crisis Game, and none other than Mr. Dan Abnett, writer for Infinite Crisis, The Fight for the Multiverse comic. We're very excited to have you here today, Dan, and of course Brent and Cardell. We all are giant DC nerds, and it's awesome.
More excited to have Dan here than me, because
I'm very excited.
I'm here every day. He's not.
Well, that's true. I'm excited to have everybody here because I just want to talk about comics. And the DC Multiverse, actually, in particular, which is our first topic. I'm really curious to know, obviously from you, Dan, but from everybody, when you have, the entire DC Multiverse at your fingertips, where do you start?
You start by crying in a corner with a gnawing sense of dread in your heart that you don't know, you even begin to know where to start. It's an amazing opportunity because there is such variety there and such a wonderful range of things to do, and I guess the hardest thing of all approaching the comic was to work out where to start and what components to build into that, because there was sort of too many great choices. There's so many things that I couldn't do, so I had to really stick to the things that I really wanted to, or seemed to make the most organic sense.
You chose, Batman, which,
yes,
to me, I think if you're going to start with the, Infinite Crisis, you kind of need to go with the world's greatest detective.
To me it seemed like the best way of introducing readership to the worlds, plural, and leading them by the hand into that story and sort of opening their eyes to the wonders of it, was to start with a classic Prime character, and that would really boil down to a sort of 3 or 4, the primary heroes of Prime DC. And I guess I could have gone with Superman, but I think Superman would be more aware of the wonders of the universe, I think, and I chose Batman because he is such a grounded character. He's familiar to everybody. You don't need to explain who he is or what he does, really. And it was an opportunity to focus on a Prime character that everybody knew, for him to use his detective skills to sort of open the door into the multiverse, and then in his own very grim, non-emotional way to experience that wonder in a way that perhaps Superman or, say, Wonder Woman would have been more kind of, okay, we'll go with this, but with Batman he's sort of a little bit out of his comfort zone, and I thought that was an interesting place to start. But he's our guide into it.
Yeah, he's both. Well, I mean, he's the guide for me. It was kind of like watching Batman discover what I as the reader knew what was kind of coming, and watching him come to terms with it, but in the way that only Bruce can.
Yeah.
Like very suspicious the whole time of everything.
Yeah, actually, as a side, before the multiverse part opens up, though, I like the way that you wrote Batman. That sort of master of everything. You have the art thieves, and he's able to discuss the different paint strokes and things like that. That's not a side of Batman you always see, or a style of Batman, I guess. It was a different style, so I really enjoyed that sort of
Thank
approach.
you. I just wanted him grounded in the kind of real world detail that forensic detail that a detective would. He knows the streets, he knows the contacts, he knows the sort of materials being passed around. It's all very important, but small scale and earthbound. So it was a deliberate way of contrasting with what he was about to encounter. But I'm glad you liked it. Thank you.
I actually really enjoyed that, and I particularly enjoyed that he was commenting on the brushstrokes as he's, pummeling.
Yeah.
Like
if you can deliver an art critique whilst punching people in the face, I think that's shows multitasking. Really,
he's a Renaissance man, really.
He is a man of many talents. Yeah. And so from there though, we quickly jumped into sort of the many other worlds in Infinite Crisis. Did you find that it was a challenge? Or did you find that anyone in particular was a challenge to write for?
They're each a challenge in as much as I really want to make sure I capture the atmosphere that the game is creating for those characters and their worlds. And they are very contrasting worlds as well, so that you want to give each one a very, very distinct visual flavour and sort of a flavour in terms of dialogue and philosophy and mentality and that kind of stuff. I think that's why I stepped Batman first into Gaslight, because it was only one step removed from what he understood. It was kind of a Twilight Zone eerie. This is Gotham, but not the Gotham I know, and enough to sort of put his hackles up and make him wonder what's going on. And then, sort of through that induction, take him to stranger and wilder places. It was. I guess with each one, I've really followed the design leads and tried to make sure that the worlds resemble the way they've been portrayed, particularly through character in the game. Wildly visually distinct, very, very exciting, and that's proved a sort of a great source of inspiration for me in terms of creating the backgrounds, the sort of things you don't see in the game, the places they go to, and the sort of stylistically the things that they have to do.
Yeah, I mean, as when we create the characters, we have to make them visually different, right? Because from the perspective the game is played and things like that. Because in a normal multiverse comic, you can get a lot of differentiation with personality and things like that. A lot of the Elseworld stories, the character doesn't look too wildly different from their base variant, you might say, but we don't have that. I don't know. I guess it's not, I would say I was going to say luxury, but that's actually not. It's just we just can't take that approach, and it's been a good thing, as you said. Working
in a different range, and it's a very visual range, and they've got to be immediately recognizable because of the nature of the game, which is interesting to feed back into the comic, though, because of course it means that my writing approach is slightly different because there is such visual differentiation, the sort of thing you wouldn't, as you say, get in most Elseworld stories where the characters are subtly different perhaps to their counterparts. So there's a sort of big sort of eye punch every time a new character arrives, and that really helps with the type of storytelling that I want to do.
Yeah. And actually, in terms of referencing the old Elseworld story, the one that kind of started them, I guess, would be Gotham by Gaslight, which we have with the Gaslight universe. But that telling of the story, it was a very traditional Victorian world, and it wasn't the sort of steampunk world that we've gone to. But again, we really needed to accent those characters. I think, and again, I think it's proved interesting story-wise as well. Yeah. That
was a fun world to write and a fun world to revisit when I came back to Luthor. So.
That was fun. Yeah, I enjoyed that one. Just getting more depth in the world, and then showing Aquaman,
yes.
And then hints of other characters, with Hawk Girl and things like that. Yeah.
I mean, speaking of Dan, the things that you enjoyed writing with Gaslight and just so far in the series, do you have maybe a favorite character that you've really that surprised you, and how much you've gotten to enjoy writing them?
Yeah, I have to say that there hasn't been a character that's disappointed me so far. There hasn't been a character that I've chosen that I've gone, I wish I'd picked somebody else. They're all really interesting, and some of them I've yet to really show their full potential. But several standouts to me. Arcane Green Lantern, who I put in because he's so visually wonderful, and I wanted a Green Lantern in there, and then realised that I liked him a lot. I sort of, as it were, found a voice for him in my head that was a mix of the sort of chivalric, all the sort of the tropes of an Arthurian knight, but was still identifiably noble, identifiably Hal, and does some incredibly valiant things without it being either pompous or cheesy, I guess, really. And so I put him in because I thought he would give great visual texture, and then ended up liking him as a character even more as I wrote him. And others, Nightmare Robin is a big favourite of mine, and also the opportunity to write the Prime characters, because it makes you look at the Prime characters differently, because you're placing them against such contrasting characters. So characters that I would always enjoy writing, like Batman and Zatanna and Cyborg, and particularly Flash. I have to say, particularly Flash. I don't know what it was. There was something about him that he had both a literal and metaphorical zest and enthusiasm for what he was getting into, and I really sort of I was about to say ran with that, and that would have been bad. But yes, it wasn't just the new iterations that I enjoyed. It gave me it sort of defamiliarized me with the Prime versions, and made me engage with them in a way that perhaps I wouldn't have done if it had been a straightforward DCU adventure set on Prime Earth with no Elseworld elements.
Oh, certainly. So, yeah, I mean, the conversation between Arcane, Green Lantern, and Batman was one of my favorites to read. Just Batman explaining that he's like, I'm just going to call you Hal. Just deal with that.
It's interesting to me because I remember when we first started concepting Arcane Green Lantern, we actually had two very different two very different images. One of them, I don't know if you remember this, Brent, but one of them had Blind Monk
Yeah, I
Hal,
remember that one, yeah.
and he was very much, he was kind of like this wizened old sage where he had like almost like a staff with a lantern at the edge of it, and he was very much like this, very much almost like a Zatoichi style, except character. And we just kept working with it, but it was difficult to actually make him resemble the Hal Jordan everyone kind of knew. So we decided to just be like, look, we'll just try this much more normal chivalric appearance for him, and that one just more or less drew itself. Like, it was one of those things where we spent so much time struggling with the other one, and it's fascinating to me how much he resonates with everyone when they see him.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy playing as Arcane Green Lantern, and I know that the designer, I think at the time, who put him together, eventually had a cosplay costume put together that he wore to one of to PAX this past spring. So yeah, he's internally very popular as well.
It turned out great. That cosplay was really awesome.
Oh yeah.
But can I just compliment Cardell on the use of the phrase "normal chivalric appearance"? Because like over here in the street outside, they're all wearing armor.
It's just commonplace.
That's how I understand Britain to be. Personally.
Yes, and you're
That's how I
absolutely.
envision it in my head.
Yes, a lot of
A cup of
monocles
tea
as
and a
well.
suit of plate mail, and you're gone.
Yeah. Either that or it's like Downton Abbey. That's the other thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
one or the other. Or sometimes maybe they both.
Yeah. Or it's Monty Python. That's all I've got. I don't have.
So for someone like Arcane Green Lantern, writing Hal versus, there's, I guess what I'm getting at is contrasting characters.
Yes.
Someone like Arcane Green Lantern versus, say, someone like Mecha Superman, two very sort of different personalities, different stories, and of course vastly different worlds. What was for you, like, how does Mecha Superman feel versus writing Arcane Green Lantern?
I have to say that every single character I've written so far, I've sort of gone with instinct and started writing them to see how it sounds and if it works. And I sort of write them big. I sort of overemphasize their characteristics and attributes, and then say maybe tone it down slightly so that it works much more in the context of the comics, so you don't get very, very loud, over the top characters. But it's just that awareness of the idea that these things can coexist if you place them together, so that the supremely supernatural magical world of Arcane up against the sort of neon tech of Mecha shouldn't work, but does in that kind of mashup way because they recognise their differences, and in fact they're both worlds are suspicious of each other. The sort of Arcane being terribly afraid of Technos because they don't know how to handle it, and the same way that sort of Mecha and other worlds don't understand how magic works, and they're therefore terribly afraid of it, and there's sort of a blind spot to each one of them. So I found the characters developed a sort of sympathy for who they really were. A sympathy for Hal, for instance, because he is extraordinarily noble and courageous. A sympathy for Mecha Superman because he is, in many ways, an extraordinary innocent. He's not a Terminator-esque destroyer of things. He is Superman that happens to be made, sort of machine-made rather than anything else, and has that almost childish, in a good way, innocence to him. And I think when you place them together, you get a really interesting resonance, sort of a harmonic resonance between them. And again, as the series has continued and I put more and more characters together, that sort of increases. So you can have, for instance, with the Arcane world, you've got Hal being extraordinarily courageous and sort of formal, and you've got Supergirl being sort of elfin and otherworldly, and you've got Zod being brutal and sort of furious and raging and elemental. So then you end up not only with a contrast, for instance, between Mecha and Arcane, but between Mecha and three different voices of Arcane, which is again helps to build them as characters, and also to show I hope to show the range that world represents.
My personal favorite moment with Arcane was when Zod decided that he was going to hit the Technos with his hammer because it made him feel better.
Yeah.
I could identify with that.
I kind of like the way you put that. I haven't thought of our different worlds on a spectrum before.
It's interesting because when we were initially talking about the different universes to try to have, we have our 6 sort of core universes that we focus on. Really, when I was thinking, it was just like, what visual themes should we have in the game? And so, you had the Gaslight sort of steampunky theme, and the Arcane had the fantasy, and then, the Mecha had the high tech and robotic. I hadn't really thought of comparing them on a spectrum, though, so that's interesting. I'm glad you found that.
Yeah, I think when you're writing a narrative story like that, those sort of elements have to, like the orrery of worlds, those elements have to sort of fit together, and the fact that they are frankly completely different yet have commonality, those points of connection because the characters are paralleled. It sort of exposes story in really interesting ways. So some of the things that have happened, I've had an episode that I was writing that was going to go in a particular place to deliver a particular sort of ending, and along the way I realised that I wanted to take an interlude because it was sort of writing itself, because this was a really interesting thing to look at. Just that combination. It's not, and it doesn't even come down to, for instance, the wonder of experienced by Prime characters when they realise there are loads of other worlds and those worlds are weird and full of other versions of themselves. It's not the arcane fear of Technos or the mecha suspicion of magic or any of those simple things. Sometimes it's a hunger. Some of the characters are intrigued by the other world in a sort of acquisitional way of thinking, gosh, you've got something I haven't got, and if I got that too, I'd be even better than I was before. And so there's all sorts of ways those kind of relationships can work.
Yeah, that actually very much I saw that in Atomic Two-Face. And the atomic world definitely has a lot less than the other worlds.
Well, their natural inclination is to scavenge anyway, because they're trying to dig up whatever is useful out of the ruins of their world. So it would be natural to extrapolate that when they go to another world that's full of great things. They want to grab it, and so his sort of avaricious tendency to improve his lot, which is, let's face it, terrible. Give him an artifact, send him to a functioning world, then he's going to want to have as much of that as he possibly can.
Yeah, that Atomic Universe, actually, as an aside, has been fun for both of us to develop, because as we've developed it internally, looking at characters and things, it's kind of like the universe where nothing goes right. It's a universe defined by war, and unfortunately. So, yeah, just an interesting aside as we've developed these universes over time.
Yes, it's notable those core worlds you've set up. Each one of them is essentially functioning according to its basis. This is the way Prime works, this is the way Arcane works, this is the way Mecha works. Even to an extent, this is the way Nightmare works, even though that's not a nice way of working, but even so, it's true to itself. But Atomic is the broken one. And that makes it sort of quite forlorn and sad and interesting. It's the one struggling to become itself again, rather than to continue on in the way it was going.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned broken, which brings us to the next topic, which is Atomic Wonder Woman. She's definitely got a bit of a broken backstory. I mean, everyone in Atomic does, but in particular with her, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts, everyone's thoughts really, on her backstory and her motives in the overall Infinite Crisis.
Well, when we first, there was actually the concept artist that really took her and ran, and it's been interesting to see how the public has kind of latched onto her, because I've seen a couple of different cosplay women dressed up as her in that outfit. But I think part of the inspiration for her was that even though her world was broken, she still had hope of rebuilding it. And also she had that, I can't remember the reference, the We Can Do It. What is that woman?
No, what is it, Betty the Builder?
Rosie the Riveter.
Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah, sort of, we can do it, sort
bandana.
of. Yeah, the bandana. Yeah. That's why she has the bandana, sort of a reference to that.
Those things actually came in a bit later. Because initially, when we first sit down with any of the main characters, we try to find, the main things that define them, and then each time we come on the Multiverse variant, we deliberately focus on just that one other aspect. So initially, for Atomic, it was actually the soldier. And that's what Wonder Woman was supposed to be. So one of the very first concepts we had of her was almost Mad Max Wonder Woman. We wanted her short hair, obviously not sunglasses, but a whole array of different kind of weapons, and that was originally that was supposed to define her. And we had the concept of, breaking up her old armor and having her cobble it together. But the concept artist was working with her more and more, and he finally was like, I don't. As he honed in on that concept more, he began to lose the Wonder Woman, because you rarely ever see Wonder Woman as just a soldier. I mean, I guess possibly the closest you got to her is the Flashpoint paradox, and even then, she was still a queen, and that came across, very strongly. But we didn't really want her as a queen in the Atomic Earth, so he basically fused a lot of those together and kind of spun that concept, about 180, where she was a soldier, sure, but hope was still the thing that defined her, and she had almost like a spunkier, kind of younger attitude, and that's what led us to where we are with Atomic Wonder Woman.
Yeah, I mean, her attitude and the found armor, that she, used her lasso of truth to fashion a chainsaw to a stop sign. All those things are definitely what makes her one of my favorite characters. I think that she's you mentioned Mad Max influences early on, Cardell. I think that I love that she kind of went more kind of a brighter post-apocalyptic. She's still dirty, and it's not all four colors comics, but I like seeing post-apocalyptic with a little bit of madcap brightness.
Well, it's not black and brown. It isn't. That's not her color palette. Yeah.
It's true, and we actually managed to squeeze that dirty oppressiveness into Atomic Green Lantern, because I feel like Hal really got the short end of the stick in that one.
Yeah. There's some great you mentioned earlier, Brent, the interactions in the game. There's some great interactions between I think it's Atomic Green Lantern and Flash.
Yeah.
They make there's some. I think Flash at one point says give.
Someone giving him a hand or something like that. Yeah. Too soon.
Thanks for the hand.
Too soon. Yeah. It just has an aside with Atomic Green Lantern. Actually, that was another one where the original inspiration for the story came from one of our engineers, who's also one of our foremost cosplayers at the building as well. But he came up with that sort of backstory idea, and then we just shaped it a little bit based on that. So, yeah, there's a lot of DC fans here, not just the people who are supposed to be, I guess.
Also, I guess I want to say to that one, even before I'll just say Josh, because that's his name.
Yeah.
Before Josh came up with that.
You spoiled it.
That pitch, I know. We were building into it.
Yeah.
Maybe he's going to show up and just guest in.
In his outfit. He'll show up in one of his cosplay outfits. Yeah.
We had some of the earlier concepts for the Atomic Green Lantern were a lot more based off of like that first Green Lantern, where he had that giant backpack with the almost like gauntlet ring that kind of came off of it, because the thought was that Atomic Earth was going to be a little bit behind in terms of like much more Cuban Missile Crisis-y, where it's like you look at it and you get that retro feel. So we were thinking, we'll go with more retro with some of these other aspects as well, but that's not ultimately where we ended up, because once Josh pitched this other idea, it was like, no, that definitely gets more of that war-torn aspect, and possibly brings back some of the darker side that really, if you looked at Atomic Wonder Woman as the emblem for that Earth, you kind of get more of a feeling of like, well, it looks like everyone's having a little bit of a party in the apocalypse, and maybe that's okay. Well, not so much, because poor Atomic Green Lantern, no party there.
Yeah.
And speaking of no parties, the Nightmare Universe, specifically, Dan, I was really, really happy to see Nightmare Robin show up in the Fight for the Multiverse storyline. What was it? Well, first of all, I know, Cardell, you had a lot of influence on Nightmare Robin, and Dan as well, of course. What was it like kind of wrapping your brains around Nightmare Robin's sort of motives and voice?
Well, Inception-wise, Nightmare Robin is a crosswords of a lot of things, for me at least, when I look at him in the lens of Infinite Crisis. So we've already kind of we've come to this conclusion that the characters are almost bigger, or the masks are bigger than the characters who are wearing them. This is why you have Damian as Robin in Nightmare Earth, as opposed to Dick or Tim, and we went with Tim for typical Robin Prime. And in this case, like, he's probably one of the largest divergences right up front, like the very first ones where it's very clear this is a different character who's wearing this particular guise. And Damian has his own very unique take on what it is to be a Robin anyway. But the backstory for him is kind of, really emphasizes legacy. Like, that is the biggest thing. That's one of the things that defines him as a character, as a person in every way. Like, he lives with the legacy of with his mother and of, Raish himself. And he also lives with the legacy of his father, and what he did to his father, like what he owes his father in terms of actually showing him what it was like to be human before he actually lost it. And then obviously you have all of this happening within the Nightmare Earth itself. So he's probably one of the most tragic characters, I feel, in that he really, like, he had a taste of what normalcy could possibly be like, and then was a contributing architect to its undoing. So really, he has this constant war between what he wants and how he thinks things should be to try to bring justice, versus just the boiler pot of rage, which more or less keeps him going. So I don't know. That's one actually of the things that I thought was really fun about writing that character, because he's such a departure from a normal Robin.
Yeah, I certainly thought that he was a great character. I mean, I selected him because I wanted there to be a sort of a sense of antagonism within this group thrown together. There is rivalry, there is sparring, and there are obvious characters, particularly later on when you get characters like Zod, who is just a prickly customer. But I wanted there not only to be a sort of a voice of dissent within the group that I was putting together, but one that was remarkably close, or should be remarkably close to Batman. Batman being the sort of the pillar in the middle that everybody has at very least respect for, and the one person that he expects to have an allegiance with is the one great voice of dissent who argues with him and squabbles and sort of has a I guess is mistrustful of everything and feels let down by things and sort of is raging against things even when he can see that it's something that's going to help him. I thought he's a sympathetic, unsympathetic character, if you sort of mean. He has this very hard exterior, but that masks something that you have great sympathy for. And he was a great character to bounce off, or he still is a great character to bounce off Prime Batman in the comic.
Yeah, I really enjoyed his interactions with Prime Batman in the comic, especially with, he shows up through one of the portals with, it's Atomic Wonder Woman and
Arcane Green Lantern.
I enjoyed seeing his interaction with the group, and like you said, Dan, his sort of dissenting opinion and voice.
Well, I mean, also you have the relationship on both sides of it, I guess. You have, Batman is used to a different Damian, and Damian's used to a different Batman. So you have that. They're sort of layering on their history on each other.
Yeah, I definitely think that, for even further off what Dan is saying, it's like when you do anything with any of these multiverse characters, you really do want to take a standard relationship and just turn it just a little bit so that people can really understand that this character is both unique and they can really appreciate that uniqueness. And I think that relationship between Nightmare Robin and I guess Nightmare Damian in many ways and Batman Prime really, really accentuates that.
Yeah, I think so. I think that not only does, Nightmare Robin's turn on that, sort of original Damian, Prime Damian, I think is a great example. But
it's how do you make Damian more screwed up? You make him a vampire.
Well,
yeah.
Even there
more angst for him.
More angst for him. Yes.
I think actually that's perfectly true though, because if you had chosen to make Nightmare Robin Dick, for instance, there would have been a greater sense of the sympathy, I think, from Prime Batman. Because there would be a sense of, oh my God, what happened to you? I know who you are, but what has happened to you? What is all this about? But he's already got that. There is already that tension, which means that it's uncomfortable to begin with, and grows from there.
Yeah. And the lack of trust in many ways, because it's like, I didn't really trust basic Damian to not stab someone, and now there's a vampire Damian running around. Like, he barely had it in control. It was really a toss-up between him and Jason Todd in that aspect, actually.
That's a good point. I'm really glad it was Damian, though. I was a big fan of. I am a big fan of Damian, especially the Batman Robin stuff with Damian and Dick and stuff. Anything with Bruce and Damian. The angst is enjoyable, and that could just be the teenage me, but
he's a great character.
Yeah, he's a great character. Yep. Well, that's going to be it for today's show. Thank you, Dan, Brent, Cardell. It's been great, been enjoyable.
Glad to be here.
Love talking about comics with you guys. Until next time, I'm Kyle Horner, and I'll see you in the multiverse.